The Ancient Light by Nico Smit. Chapter 1. Green Oak Town. Juan's feet moved lazily as they led him along the dusty road. The leaky bucket of murky water perched on his shoulder provided a steady trickle of water, slowly soaking the back of his tattered shirt. The sun blazed down on Green Oak Town, baking the sand and playing tricks on one's vision. Juan squinted as he observed the road dance in the distance. The heat was warping reality slightly, as if viewed through a mirror of flowing water. Juan looked around at nothing in particular as he followed the well-known path back home from the water pit. How could it all come to this? He thought to himself as he had done countless times over the years. He observed the thick coat of dust that covered remnants of tall old buildings, rocky paths, and rusty poles that must have been used to support something in days gone by. The taller ruins were like lone pillars, a dilapidated palisade, sticking out from the remains of what was still called Green Oak Town. Most dwellings along the road were constructed from salvaged pieces of old buildings. Planks, iron, stone, and mud were all indiscriminately brought together in a hodgepodge fashion to build the multiples of small, shoddy shelters that the inhabitants called homes. Ironically, there seemed to be only the color of dust in Green Oak Town, very little green, and not a single oak tree. The name seemed to be a mirthless analogy for the town itself, something that was alive once, but now remained only as a sad memory of what has been in ages past. Everything was possible in those days, with inventions of all sorts and technology in every home. He heard his grandmother's voice in the back of his head. He used to listen to her for hours on end, as she would tell him about the good old days, when the world still made sense. Apparently, every town, city, and country was connected in some way, and communications constantly ran all over Endro. It was like a big global community, separated yet connected and working together. They had some way of communicating over great distances as well, and so they did, constantly sharing knowledge, philosophy, and notions of truth. Truth. He pondered the known word that also seemed somehow so foreign to him. What is truth? Juan didn't know all the details. His grandmother did not really know how it worked herself, and she died when he was still young. At this stage in time, there was almost no more contact with people from outside the isolated town. Green Oak Town lay between a range of dusty, rocky hills with some scattered skeletal trees and small, roundish bushes as the main vegetation. The northern hills at least had a bit more natural flora than the rest of the area. Further away from town, the Naird River flowed from the west and forked out to both sides of the hill country, flowing down in two ravines, bordering Green Oak Town on all but the eastern side. To the east lay the valley scrubland, leading into the dark woods known as Mortar. What once were roads leading out of Green Oak Town have become overgrown. It was too dangerous to travel far. Dark creatures and dangerous men roamed the outer areas of towns, preying on anyone willing to travel their way. Only those who already counted themselves as dead, or the hardiest of men, would brave the old routes to travel to other towns. Murder and death were already common enough in Green Oak Town. But the further away you moved from the town, the more dangerous it became. Juan wiped the drops of sweat from his forehead and adjusted the bucket on his shoulder. The trickle of water irritated the back of his neck. He rubbed it in agitation, feeling the mark under his fingers. Some of the inhabitants of Green Oak Town frowned upon his birthmark, saying it was unnatural. As it was on the back of his neck, Juan could never clearly observe it himself. Apparently, it looked like a typical brownish birthmark. The only real distinction was that it was roughly formed in the shape of a star. He shrugged off the thought as he passed a cluster of dwellings. Juan pretended not to notice the people as he passed by their homesteads, but his peripheral vision took in the entirety of the scene around him. It was pitiful, to say the least. He eyed his own dusty clothes. Pitiful indeed, he thought, as his mind retold the old story he heard from his grandmother. It all started too many years ago to count. The people of the world chose leaders from the different nations to rule over Endro. Such was the custom in those days. The people thought they knew what was best for themselves and who would be most suited to lead, but they were wrong. The first rulers of Endro, according to the tales, did a good job, and peace reigned. As morality faltered over time, however, the people wanted more rights, more freedom, and more choices to make their own decisions without consequence. Lawlessness abounded. The people chose leaders based on the wickedness in their own hearts. And then, finally, they chose him, Greco, the now supreme ruler of Endro. Juan wondered so many times how the people could have chosen someone like that to lead them. How could they all have been so blind? In the beginning, everybody was amazed by his powers. They came from all over the world to see him and to bow down before him. It is said that he could heal the sick and speak to the dead. He gave people freedom to do what they wanted, without consequence, and they loved him for it. We destroyed ourselves. Our own foolishness was our downfall. Man is forever cursed to his own destruction, his grandmother said. Juan passed the wreckage of a building that seemed to have been destroyed in the Great War. No more than a foundation and piles of stone now remained of it. Some of the countries no longer wanted to be under the reign of Greco, and so a large group of rebels rose up against him and the combined Endro forces, but they were no match. A global conflict ensued and war raged on for more than 50 years. Everything once built up was torn down. Cities and nations fell. Ethics blurred. And in the end, both sides were reduced to no more than savageness, destroying, killing, raping, and pillaging. By the time that the rebellion was crushed, the rest of Endro wanted to release themselves again from the iron grip that their once favored ruler held over them. They tried to remove Greco from his seat of power, but it was too late. When the people attempted to overthrow his rule, he used his powers to open the very gates of Shekra, and so released the dark powers onto Endro. Junker, Grotten, Slivna, and even fouler and greater creatures of darkness now inhabited the once prosperous Endro, bound under the will of Greco's maleficent power. The dark creatures now did Greco's bidding, and any form of resistance to his rule was instantly quashed. No man now dared to go against Greco's rule. Only in stories of legend was it told of valiant men standing against the dark creatures. 500 years later, Greco was still the supreme overlord and king over all of Endro. In their little town, the people went mostly unnoticed by the kingdom. But every year there would still be soldiers coming to take young men forcefully to join Greco's army. Juan considered his own age. His time might come soon, he thought. There was no force strong enough to topple Greco's might. He withstood even death by aging. He ruled by fear and pervasive power, with his elite Yinka armies and the masses of men who still followed him. Since Juan can remember, there was no hope for Endro.